What's up, everybody? Michael Walsh here. So I've got a bit of a hot take today, but I'm here to tell you, I don't think you can put Ilia Topuria on a GOAT list. Now, it's end of the year, so I'm seeing people's channels. They're putting out updated versions of their GOAT lists, standard fare. I will be putting out my own updated list here, probably early January before the next UFC card. But I'm here to tell you, Ilia Topuria should not be on a GOAT list. And if you've seen my GOAT list, over the summer I made a top 20 GOATs of all time list. He was not on there, and I explained why, but I'll rehash it a bit here. It's not that he hasn't already done stuff that could get you somewhere on a GOAT list. So by that I mean, like, if he gets hit by a bus today and all we have is his current body of work, it's still enough to get him somewhere. Like, it's not going to be that high. Like, some people act like he's already done enough to be top 5 of all time, and that's fucking insane. But it's enough to be somewhere. It's comparable to other people's runs at certain points in their career, and I'm going to unpack that. But, like, he's done enough at present to be somewhere in a top 20 to top 30-ish range, I would say. And so you might ask, like, well, okay, put him there then. Put him top 20, put him top 30, whatever. Like, why can't we put him on a GOAT list? And the reason I would object to putting him on a list is because he's just so early in his career. There's so many ways it can still go. To me, I think it's kind of pointless to, like, prematurely put someone on a list when they're still, telling the lion's share of their story. So I'll give you some comparisons, because I'm reminded of, like, years ago, like 10 years ago or something. I remember on Facebook, I made an MMA GOAT list. And it must have been closer to 15 years ago, because I had guys like Shogun Rua and Quentin Jackson on that list. It was like a top 20 or something. But I did not have John Jones. And one of my buddies chimed in and he was like, "Where's John Jones? Like, he beat Rampage, he beat Shogun, like, he's beaten other guys like Machida and Rashad, like, where the fuck is he?" And I said, it's too early. The guy's like 25. Like, we need to see what happens, because he could go on to win and win and win and win, which of course is what happened with Jones. And now, assuming you allow PED cheats on your list, like, he's got to be pretty high on anyone's GOAT list. But at the time, I was like, look, he could go on to lose a bunch. Like, he could fall off a cliff, and it's going to affect how we view him, because we've seen that happen. There's been a lot of fighters where if you took this high point in the early or mid part of their career and you just, like, froze that in time and looked at it, it looks like GOAT material. Like, if you were making a GOAT list at the time of those achievements and you were willing to include them, like, you could make an argument for them being a GOAT. But now, as time has told the full arc of their journey, the full arc of their combat sports career, now no one sees them as GOATs. So I'll give you some examples. The ones that are most comparable to Ilia are like other double champs. Look at Conor McGregor. When Conor beat Jose Aldo, that was fucking huge. I know I've got viewers probably who weren't even watching the sport when that happened. They've probably heard of when that happened, or maybe they saw, like, the highlight on the internet or something, but they weren't watching the sport at the time, so they don't actually know how big a deal it was. But Jose Aldo was one of the pound-for-pound best fighters in the world. This was during his whole, like, win streak as a champion. And if you combine his UFC and WEC defenses, which you should, because the UFC had no bantamweight and featherweight divisions, that was all into the WEC. When the UFC absorbed the WEC, they just made the current champions the UFC champions without having to fight for a vacant belt or anything. It was similar to when they absorbed Strikeforce and just made Ronda Rousey the official UFC women's bantamweight champion without making her fight anybody, because it's not like they had a division. So if you combine Jose Aldo's WEC and UFC defenses, I think he got 9 of them. And so that was halted by McGregor. McGregor showed up, rolled in, and knocked his ass out in 13 seconds. And that was huge. That's one of the greatest wins in the history of the sport. And then he goes up to fight Nate Diaz on short notice at welterweight, loses, rematches him at welterweight, wins, and then takes on Eddie Alvarez, the UFC lightweight champion, and just schools him, knocks him out in 2 rounds. If you just stopped right there, McGregor has like a strong argument to being not the GOAT, but being somewhere on the GOAT list. Like that's an insane strength of schedule. That's an insane body of work right there. But what happened? He went on to fight other people. He fought Khabib and lost. He fought Poirier twice again and lost. Like he's not done well since, and that has diminished our view of him. We've seen him as a bit of a whether you want to blame his drug use, his lifestyle, the money going to his head, whether you want to blame that stuff, whether you want to blame the shift in his style from more of like that karate focus to that boxing focus, whether you just want to say he was like always better at featherweight than he was at lightweight, whatever it is, like nevertheless, like he undid a lot of his good work because it's all well and good to become double champ and it's all well and good to school Eddie Alvarez. But when you go on to lose twice to Dustin Poirier and get smashed by Khabib, the fact that you were lightweight champion suddenly means a lot less. And that's different, I would say, than another guy who's comparable to Ilia Topuria, which is Henry Cejudo. And if you saw earlier this week, I put out like a whole career retrospective on Henry, and it was quite favorable to him. In Henry's case, he went on a big losing streak, but I don't think you can hold it against him because it was all past his prime, whereas McGregor's losses were not past his prime. With Henry, it's more like Ilia, where like Henry kind of left on top. He became double champ, defended both belts, which is one more than Ilia's currently done. Ilia's yet to defend the lightweight belt, but they're comparable in achievement. Ilia sits between McGregor and Henry in terms of just pure double champ achievements by, if we're treating all title wins and defenses as equal. McGregor wins both belts, defends neither of them. Ilia wins the featherweight belt, defends it, wins the lightweight belt, has yet to defend it. Henry wins the flyweight belt, defends it, bantamweight belt, defends it. Anyways, in Henry's case, while it puts a bad taste in your mouth, I don't really think the current loss, the current 4 losses, and retiring on such a sour note, I don't think you can hold that against him in GOAT discussions. Like, I think Henry, he may as well have just never fought again after beating Dominic Cruz. And with that, where's Henry? You could argue he's top 20 GOAT. You could argue, I think it'd be hard to get him into top 15. And I think he's definitely top 30. And frankly, it'd be hard to get him lower than top 25, honestly. So he's somewhere in top 15 to top 25. That's about where I'd put Henry. And if Ilia Topuria gets hit by a bus tomorrow, like that's about where I'm going to put him. He's going to be somewhere around where Henry is. Whereas Conor McGregor is like a little bit lower than them. Maybe he's still top 25. He's like probably top 30. But, he's a little bit lower than them because, again, if Henry, like I don't think you can hold Henry's losses against him. And if Ilia never fights again, it'll be like Khabib retiring or something. We just won't know if he would have lost. But Conor, we just know we went on to lose to guys like Khabib and Dustin. So that counts against him a bit. Now, with Ilia, like, this could happen. Like, he could fight Arman Tsarukyan in his next fight somehow. Like, we'll see how this all plays out with his personal life and his divorce and everything. We'll see how the title picture plays out at lightweight. But, like, it's conceivable that he sits out a while. Maybe Justin Gaethje beats Paddy or vice versa. The winner fights Arman and loses. And then, boom, Arman fights Ilia on his return. Let's say that happens and Arman wins. And let's say Ilia fights someone else then and loses. And let's say, let's say he goes back down to featherweight and then, Volk's no longer the champ and it's someone else who, it's some promising young striker and knocks him out there. Like, you just never know. He could go on to have a bad streak. He could go on to undo all the good faith that he's earned with this double champ status. And then people are going to look and they're going to say, well, Volk was old and coming off a knockout loss. And, Holloway was actually kind of old too. And, and maybe Holloway is just better at lightweight anyways. And, Oliveira was kind of old too. And those are like his wins. It's all over old guys. And when he fought Arman and when he fought whoever else and when he fights whoever the guy at featherweight is, when he actually fights young guys in their prime, who have good style, for whom he's not like a stylistic kryptonite anyway, all of a sudden he loses. Who knows? And some of you might be rolling your eyes and saying, like, that's just not going to happen. I don't buy that. I'm not saying I'm betting on that to happen. I'm expecting Ilia, assuming he sticks around, to achieve great things and kind of climb in GOAT status. But we've seen this before. Like, again, I said the easiest comparisons are guys like McGregor and Cejudo, but we've had a lot of people who have had these streaks and these moments where it looked like they were GOAT material. And if you made a GOAT list at that point, you might be tempted to include them. But in the aftermath, they went on to lose a bunch, and we say, never mind. So, for example, Junior Dos Santos. That was a guy who had to largely clear out the heavyweight division to get his title shot. This is back when heavyweight was still kind of good. And he beat one of the heavyweight GOATs to get his fucking belt. Because in the lead up, he beat guys like Crow Cop, Gilbert Ivel, Fabricio Verdum, Gabriel Gonzaga, Roy Nelson, Shane Carwin. Like, he had to do all that just to get a title shot. And then when he did, he knocked out Cain Velasquez in about a minute. And then he defended his belt against Frank Mir and, like, cleaned house on him very easily. Like, at that moment in time, he was looking like, not the greatest fighter to ever live, not the number one GOAT of all time, but if you made a GOAT list at that moment and you were, like, willing to include him, and he was, like, top 15 or something, that wouldn't have been insane, And, just look at what happened, though. He goes on to lose to Cain twice. He has other good wins. He beats Mark Hunt. He beats a young Stipe. He beats Ben Rothwell and kind of takes his win streak away and earns a title shot against Stipe, who's then the champion. And that's all well and good. And he beats Derek Lewis. But, it's checkered after that. He gets smashed by Cain twice. He proves he's not the top banana between the two of them. So that Cain is the greater heavyweight of all time. And he has other losses. He loses. He gets knocked out by Alistair Overeem. He, later in his career, he loses to Francis Ngannou. Like, again, he has like a close war with Stipe when he's younger, but then gets knocked out by him later on. It's just, no one now is even tempted to say that Junior Dos Santos is a top 20 or top 30 fighter of all time. But if you took it when he was champion, if you took it after the Frank Mir fight, you'd be tempted. Same with another heavyweight, Brock Lesnar. You might laugh to hear that, but like, when he was champion, he was doing some pretty unthinkable shit because he won the UFC heavyweight championship in his fourth fight ever. Okay? So to beat a legend like Randy Couture in your fourth fight and get the belt, to defend the belt against your rival and like, even bigger and younger, kind of more prime, more appropriate opponent, also legend Frank Mir, to beat him in your first title defense, and then have your second title defense be against Shane Carwin, who was undefeated, who had finished everybody, and who appeared to be a potential like stylistic nightmare, to weather a storm and beat that guy and finish him, and to be 5-1 and be a UFC champion with 2 title defenses. That's Alex Pereira shit. In fact, that's better than Alex Pereira did. Okay? And most people are willing to put Alex, like, relatively high on their GOAT list. Like, that's the shit Brock Lesnar was doing. But then what happened? He gets, like, dog-walked by Cain, and then dog-walked by Overeem, sits out forever, comes back, just roided to the gills, and beats an old Mark Hunt. And now, again, is anyone tempted to put him top 20 GOAT of all time? Of course not. But if you were doing it when he was champion, or if he just retired on top, if he just retired after the Shane Carwin win, there would be an argument, but we needed to see it unfold. We needed to see him fight more people, to see where he really where he really stood in the division and amongst the other greats. We needed to see it. And same with Ilia. He's just not fought a lot of fucking dudes. Like, maybe the most extreme example, and even better one than like Brock, would be a fighter named Cejudo, whom I assume most of you haven't heard of. He's sort of a journeyman, but he came out hot. Like, he had a judo background, he'd done some kickboxing, but he came out, and in his like third fight, he knocked out Rogerio Nogueira's younger brother, the light heavyweight, or not younger brother, they're twins, but his smaller brother, the light heavyweight. He knocked him out in about a minute, and then he fought Ricardo Arona, another elite light heavyweight, and knocked him out in about a minute. So this guy was like 4-1 and had back-to-back 1-minute knockouts over Rogerio Nogueira and Arona, this guy appeared to be the coming man. It seemed like he was going to take over the world. And if you, in that moment, were like making a GOAT list, you know, he wouldn't have as strong as a claim as the other people I mentioned, like Brock and Junior, but like top 30 maybe? I mean, like there could be an argument because like look at what he's done so quickly. Again, if he just stopped fighting after that, if he got hit by a bus after that, he'd go down as one of the great what ifs, but he'd also have some argument to being somewhere in the GOAT discussion. Maybe not even top 30, but like how far do you want to go out? Top 40, top 50? Like he'd be somewhere. But now he's nowhere because of what happened after that. He got signed to the UFC, took on Lyoto Machida, lost, went 1-1 in his next 2, got cut from the UFC with a 1-2 record, and has since go on to just be a 50-50 journeyman. Like he retired back, I checked, he retired back in 2017 with a 19-18 record. Okay, he just didn't pan out at all. And you wouldn't have guessed that by the fact that he beat like 2 top 10 light heavyweights, both in a minute, in his like 3rd and 4th fights. You know, you just wouldn't have thought. But sometimes that's how it goes. Again, it's like Brock. It's like, you know, he looked possibly unbeatable when he was taking on guys like Mir and Carwin. But then what happens? You know, just better guys show up and they clean house on him. Junior Dos Santos, even more so, looked pretty fucking unbeatable when he was champion, but look at what Kane did in the rematches, and then Junior just never quite got there again. You know, he eventually got to a title shot after losing to Overeem and stuff, but like, he just never quite put it together again. And again, no one is tempted to put Junior Dos Santos top 20 or even top 30 in their GOAT lists, you know? He's somewhere, like maybe he's top, like, he's probably not even top 50. He might be like top, you know, he's like top 100, but you know, how far do you want to go out? And so again, all this is to say, like, I just think it's pointless to put Ilia Topuria on a GOAT list. It's too early. He's too young. There's too much room for him to both achieve far more than he already has and to just completely disappoint us and go on a losing streak, which again, some people might just think is like unthinkable given the guy's youth and his skill, but is it unthinkable? Just like what happened to Conor McGregor. And this guy is like, you know, it would be so appropriate because he's like emulating McGregor in almost every fucking way. So, you know, is it unthinkable that he is a guy who like is meant to burn bright but for a short amount of time? Because that's the story for these people. It's like Ronda Rousey, right? Like, you know, we at least not, you know, tend to focus on the male fighters in these GOAT discussions, but like look at the female fighters. Like Ronda Rousey could have retired undefeated, and if she had, she'd go down as one of the GOATs, possibly the GOAT. I mean, she's still somewhere in the GOAT discussion. You can't find that many better fighters than her in the female divisions. But if she retired on top, if she never lost to Holly Holm, she'd have an argument to being the best ever. Yeah, it wouldn't be the strongest argument, but she'd have an argument, and people would think much more highly of her than they do now. But the fact that she got just dog-walked by Holly Holm and Amanda Nunes and then never fucking came back to win, like, that horribly hurt her legacy. Horribly. You know, it's the same thing. Like, and if you were making a GOAT list prior to those fights while she was still on her win streak, it would be misleading. And sure, that would be misleading for multiple reasons. The female divisions were much earlier along at that point, so we just wouldn't have Shevchenko and Johanna and Weili Zhang, and we wouldn't have Amanda Nunes. Like, we went, like, Cyborg was around, and that's about it. Like the other great female fighters hadn't come into their own yet. But so, you know, you wouldn't be wrong to like to be like, well, Ronda Rousey's probably the best female fighter ever. But I'm just saying, like, if you could freeze her win streak in time and compare it to those other great champions like Shevchenko, it would look a lot better if you didn't have to consider those 2 horrible losses at the end. Especially when those 2 horrible losses are against people who weren't like super young or anything. It's not like Amanda Nunes was so much younger than Rousey, and Rousey was just like the old, you know, it's not like BJ Penn losing to Yair Rodriguez or something. It's not like that. You know, she was basically losing to a contemporary. You know, it just showed that the game had passed her by and that she thought she had skills in areas that she truly did not. But, so yeah, all this to say, it's not unthinkable that Ilia Topuria is going to be like a Conor McGregor, is going to be like a Ronda Rousey, who's going to like have this great streak, burn bright for a short amount of time, and then fall off somehow. And it might be personal problems, you never know. It might just be that, you know, he's got exploitable things in his style that some people start figuring out, or he starts getting like tough matchups for, you know, that there was a little bit of fool's gold in some of his wins. Yeah, because again, his elite wins are over old dudes. They're still great wins. Even if he gets exposed a little bit, they should still be considered great wins. And as a double champ in those divisions, like he's still somewhere, like even if he just goes on to lose a bunch, he'll still be somewhere in the GOAT list. He's not going to be erased the way guys like Brock and Cejudo have. But that could be the difference between being one of the best ever, being top 10, being top 5, and being way back in the pack, being top 30, top 40, you know? So since there's so much realistic room for this to go any one of those directions, I think it's just pointless to put him on the list right now. Whereas I don't think it's pointless to put other people on the list who are still proving things. Like Islam Makhachev isn't retired. He's still got stuff to prove. And so if you put him on a list now, he could go up that list if he goes on to defend his welterweight belt. Rob Dvalishvili, like he might be, you know, I don't know if you'd lower him on your list because he lost to Peter Yan. I think I'd more just keep him where I had him. But, you know, you might be tempted to place him higher prior to that loss. You might be, you know, he still might win the belt back. They could have a trilogy fight and he could win it back, and that will add to his legacy, you know? So, like, he still has room to do that. Same with Pantoja, same with, like, Alex Pereira, you know? He's still got some time left to maybe go for that heavyweight strap and stuff like that. So there's guys who are active who still have time to add to their legacy and still have time to lose, but most of these guys are nearing the end of their careers. Most of these guys, like Merab, like he'd already had his 13 or 14 fight win streak, whatever it was, all his title defenses. He's already 34 years old. Like most of his story is written. Whether he goes on to keep losing or whether he wins his belt back, that will affect things a little bit. But Merab could lose his next 5 fights, and it's not going to keep him out of the top 10 GOAT list. Like he's cemented as a top 10 at a minimum. You know, you might even have him top 5. Like, that just can't be undone no matter what happens going forward. Whereas with Ilia, if Ilia loses his next 5 fights, you know, is anyone going to have him top 10? Whereas people currently have him, like, top 3 in some cases, you know? So that's why I think it's stupid. And I've talked long enough about this. And again, expect my updated GOAT list to be coming in the next few weeks. But at the forefront, I just wanted to chime in on Ilia and say why, like, there's just no point in putting him on the list.